My partner found out that I was pregnant and betrayed me at my friend's wedding. Please excuse my English, I'm still working on becoming fluent. I'm a 26-year-old woman from Germany who moved to Canada 6 years ago. Shortly after arriving, I met my partner Kyle, who is 39 years old. We connected instantly, and within a year, we decided to move in together. Even though we work in different fields, we earn about the same amount annually, which has made our life together comfortable. In July, I discovered that I was pregnant. When I shared the news with Kyle, he seemed frustrated and distant. I reminded him that I had repeatedly cautioned him about the interactions between my medication and pregnancy, and that my doctor had advised us to use condoms during this time. Despite my concerns, he had refused to take precautions. Eventually, he came around and told me he was happy to become a father and would support me throughout the pregnancy. We were invited to a destination wedding in Mexico. One of Kyle's close friends was getting married. Given my condition and the fact that I had been quite ill lately, with several hospitalizations, my doctor advised me not to travel. I explained this to Kyle, expecting his understanding and support. Instead, he became upset, expressing how much he wanted me to accompany him. He seemed more concerned about attending the wedding with me than about my health. Tired of his persistent grumpiness, I told him that it was fine for him to go without me. I assured him that I would be okay for the week he would be away. I also spoke with his mother, who kindly offered to drive me to the hospital if needed during his absence. With that settled, Kyle left for Mexico on Saturday evening, and the wedding was scheduled for the following Tuesday. On the day of the wedding, Kyle sent me several pictures and messages, telling me how much he missed me and wished I were there. I replied, expressing hope that we could take more trips together once the baby arrived. However, the next day, Wednesday, I didn't hear from him at all. Concerned, I sent him a few texts, but there was no response. By Thursday, my worry had intensified, so I decided to reach out to his friend who was also at the wedding. His friend replied promptly saying, "Oh, yeah, he's fine. I'll tell him to text you." Despite this assurance, I still didn't hear anything from Kyle. My concern turned into anxiety. Was he okay? Was something wrong? On Friday evening, he finally called. Relief washed over me as I answered the phone, but that quickly turned into confusion. I asked him what was going on and told him how worried I had been. He asked how I was feeling and if I needed any help. I told him I was managing fine, but was curious about why he hadn't been in touch. Then he said he needed to talk to me about something important. Kyle confessed that he had made a terrible mistake. He told me that he had gotten drunk and ended up sleeping with one of the bridesmaids, the bride's sister. He said that in the morning he realized how foolish he had been and asked her to leave. Trying to justify his actions, he said, "I made a mistake, but you have to understand that if you were here with me, this wouldn't have happened. I was drunk and lonely. It was a one-time thing and meant nothing." I was stunned. My mind felt numb, and I didn't know how to respond. After a moment, I managed to ask him why he had avoided contacting me for days and was only telling me now. I questioned whether he had been with her all this time. He denied it, saying he needed time to think and was ashamed of his actions. A mix of anger and hurt surged through me. I told him not to bother coming home. I said he could stay with her or his mother until I found a new place to live because I didn't want to see him again. He accused me of being selfish, hormonal, and overreacting to a single mistake. He insisted that he was taking responsibility and was willing to do anything to make it up to me. I began to question myself. Was I overreacting by refusing to consider reconciliation for the sake of our unborn child? My best friend suggested that we try counseling and give him one last chance. She believed that people could change and that it might be worth exploring before making a final decision. But I was so upset that I couldn't think clearly. The next day, following advice from friends, I decided to reach out to the bridesmaid and Kyle's friend. I sent them messages explaining that Kyle had admitted to the hookup and that he claimed it was a one-time mistake. I asked if there was more to the story that they would be willing to share. To my surprise, they both blocked me immediately. Soon after, all of Kyle's friends began blocking me on social media. That night, Kyle sent me a message, which seemed to be written under the influence of alcohol. He accused me of being irrational and overreacting. He said that he had done the right thing by confessing to me, yet I was acting like a crazy person and harassing his friends and their family. He called me insecure and said it was pathetic. He declared that we were over and demanded that I move out of his house immediately. Not once did he mention the baby. I felt exhausted and emotionally drained. I didn't have the energy to respond. I spent the day crying and decided that I needed to leave. I made arrangements to move back to Germany to be with my family. They were supportive and happy that I was coming home, especially my mother. I didn't plan to say goodbye to Kyle's mother, as I wasn't ready to face any more confrontation, and I knew she might try to involve Kyle. As I sat at the airport waiting for my flight, I decided to send a message to Kyle's mother to explain what had happened. I thought she deserved to know the truth. To my astonishment, she called me back almost immediately, sounding furious. She accused me of twisting the story to cover up my own infidelity. Confused, I asked her what she was talking about. She told me that Kyle had informed everyone, including her, that he had discovered I was having an affair with a coworker. He claimed that he had accessed my social media accounts. He had all my passwords, although I never had any of his, and found evidence of my supposed affair. He said I was trying to trick him into raising a child that wasn't his. I was shocked and explained to her that this made no sense. Most of my coworkers work remotely, and I rarely interact with them outside of professional settings. I have a small social media presence with maybe 25 followers on Instagram, most of whom are family members from back home. I also have a strict personal rule against adding coworkers on social media to keep my professional and personal lives separate. Despite my explanations, she wouldn't listen. She insisted that her son was heartbroken after discovering my alleged affair while he was alone in Mexico. She berated me, questioning how I could do such a thing to him. Frustrated and hurt, I told her that I was done arguing and ended the call. I realized then that Kyle was trying to shift the blame onto me by fabricating lies about my fidelity. It was a manipulative tactic to make himself look like the victim. I couldn't believe that he would stoop so low. I took a deep breath and looked around the bustling airport. Despite everything, I felt a sense of relief. I was leaving behind a toxic situation and heading toward a new chapter in my life. I had submitted a request for time off to my boss, who was incredibly supportive. I planned to settle back home over the next few weeks and focus on my well-being and the baby. Upon arriving in Germany, my family welcomed me with open arms. My mother hugged me tightly, and I felt the weight of the past few days begin to lift. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a routine. I found a local doctor to continue my prenatal care and began exploring options for remote work with my company. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some paperwork, I received an email from Kyle. He apologized profusely for everything that had happened. He admitted that he had lied about me cheating to cover up his own guilt. He begged me to forgive him and asked for another chance, promising that he would change. I stared at the email, conflicted. Part of me wanted to believe that he could change, but I also knew that I couldn't trust him anymore. His actions had caused me immense pain, and I had to think about what was best for me and the baby. I decided not to respond to me. Instead, I reached out to a counselor to help me process everything that had happened. Through therapy, I began to heal and gain clarity about my situation. I realized that I deserved to be treated with respect and honesty, and so did my child. In the following weeks, I focused on building a new life. I reconnected with old friends and even joined a support group for single mothers. Sharing experiences with others who were in similar situations helped me feel less alone. My mother was an immense help, attending doctor appointments with me and preparing the nursery. Meanwhile, Kyle continued to send messages, oscillating between apologies and accusations. In one message, he would beg for forgiveness. In the next, he would blame me for ruining his life. It became clear that his behavior was erratic and that he hadn't truly accepted responsibility for his actions. I decided to set boundaries. I wrote him a carefully worded email stating that all communication between us should be focused on the baby and that any further harassment would not be tolerated. I suggested that if he genuinely wanted to be involved in the child's life, we could discuss co-parenting arrangements through a mediator or legal counsel. As my pregnancy progressed, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. I enrolled in prenatal classes and began to feel more confident about becoming a mother. My employer agreed to let me work remotely indefinitely, which was a huge relief. Financial independence was important to me, and I was grateful to maintain my career. One day, I received a letter from Kyle's mother. She apologized for not believing me and explained that she had confronted Kyle after noticing inconsistencies in his stories. He had finally admitted to her that he had lied about my supposed affair. She expressed regret for her harsh words and asked if there was any way to make amends. I appreciated her reaching out but wasn't sure how to respond. Trust had been broken, and I needed to protect my emotional well-being. I decided to write back, thanking her for the apology, but explaining that I needed time and space. I told her that my priority was the baby, and that I hoped she would respect my wishes. As my due date approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The support from my family and friends had been incredible, and I knew I wasn't alone in this journey. On a sunny morning in April, my son was born. Holding him for the first time was the most profound experience of my life. All the stress and pain from the past months seemed to fade away in that moment. I sent a birth announcement to Kyle, informing him of his son's arrival. He replied, expressing a desire to meet the baby. After careful consideration and discussions with my family and counselor, I agreed to a supervised visit. I believed that our son had the right to know his father, provided it was in a safe and healthy environment. The first visit was tense but civil. Kyle seemed genuinely moved upon meeting his son. He apologized again for everything and expressed a desire to be part of our child's life. I told him that consistent and respectful behavior would be necessary, and that any involvement would be on terms that prioritized our sons. Over time, we established a co-parenting arrangement. While I remained cautious, I noticed that Kyle was making an effort to be responsible. We communicated primarily about matters concerning our son, which helped maintain clear boundaries.